Hey, what's going on, guys? Jake with Slick Rock, and behind me here is my Kawasaki KRX. So we've been doing upgrades over the years and stuff. Just everything that we run into, we like beefing it up, making it a little bit better. These machines have been an absolute blast to rock crawl in. So we just keep making little tweaks, trying to make it better. Just got it back from Event Racing for a little cage upgrade and some rock sliders, a little bit of exo. And next thing we're going to dive into, issue that we've been having, and obviously when you're running 37-inch tires, 4-inch portals, the biggest complaint is steering. So when we are crawling and we put this into four-wheel locked, you're basically going straight. you get to go in a straight line at that point, not getting much help from power steering. So that's the project. I got the dash taken apart, and we're going to be replacing the EPS system, so the electronic power steering. We are going to be replacing it with Super ATV's Easy Steer, their new Series 6 600 watt power steering system. So as you can see, it's made for massive rides. I think this qualifies. Perfect for rock crawling, mud bogging, perfect. What I'm really looking forward to is they claim that it amplifies steering up to 5 times, which is desperately needed in this. Like I said, when we are in four-wheel drive locked in these things, you're basically going in a straight line. So we're going to start getting into this. First thing I gotta do is get this motor out, and let's get into it. All right, to get the upper shaft disconnected from the EPS system, there was two bolts on the top side of the EPS motor and 1 bolt on the top of the lower shaft. Once you get those off, the very upper shaft going to the steering wheel has 2 rubber boots, remove those, and there are 2 C-clips holding the shaft in. So once you get those C-clips off, you can pull the shaft up, which allows you to get the upper shaft off. All right, one thing's become very apparent in this video. I'm going to be using the word shaft quite a bit. Let's get our laughs out, get the giggles out, and let's get through this install. All right, so as you can see here, I've got the upper shaft disconnected, and I haven't been able to get the lower shaft off. What I'm hoping is once I remove the EPS mounting bolts, the 3 bolts that are holding that in, that I'll be able to lift it up and get that lower shaft out. So also there are, if you can see in here, 3 connectors that go on, one here, one on this end, and then there's one off this back side that you need to disconnect before removing. All right, so without a doubt, the worst part is getting the lower shaft off the EPS unit. Now, the easiest solution would be completely loosen the rack and let the rack drop down so you can get that shaft off. I didn't want to go to that effort right now because it requires removing a winch, moving a front diff forward. So we're going to get into that project here in a little bit, because we actually do have the Super ATV Rack Boss 2.0 going in, which I'm really excited about. So that in combination with the 600 watt motor should be freaking sweet. So what I ended up doing is just using some pry bars, and with the movement of the motor back up in here, I was able to get the shaft off of the steering rack. So now I just got to keep trying to finagle to get that off. Once that's loose, I'll work on getting the motor out. Success. Lower shaft has been removed. I was able to do so without dropping the rack and pinion down, so win. And I think we're gonna start a drinking game. Every time the word shaft is mentioned, drink up. All right, motor is out. So when it's in there, you're able to disconnect this one and this one. Once you get that lower shaft off, you can rotate this in there and I thought this was one, but it's actually two, and you pop both those out. So once that was all done, I then tried to pull the motor out through here or up here. Wasn't able to get it lined up to be able to do so, and it was really tight down low. So what I ended up doing was removing the brake assembly, which wasn't too hard. It was 3 bolts, 1, 2, and a lower one. And then right here, there's a pin with a cotter pin. You just pull that and undo those bolts, pop that down, and the motor came right out. All right, we got the new Series 6 all opened up here. And obviously, motor, the new standalone ECU. The longer one is the lower shaft, shorter one is the upper shaft. And then you have the ECU mounts that mount to this. And then there's one mount that looks like that mounts to the existing frame, and then the motor mounts to that. We also have the wiring, which is pretty straightforward. 2 battery, positive and ground, and then comes up, plugs to the ECU, and then the 2 off of the motor also plug to the new ECU. So let's get after it and start putting this together. So first step is gonna put the lower shaft in. Once the lower shaft's in, I'm going to get this mounted. Once that's mounted, we will then put the motor in, connect it to the lower shaft, and then attach it to the mount. So let's go to there. So one thing that I found that's made it easier when installing these shafts back onto the rack and pinion and the steering motor is to just spread these gaps open a little bit more. It makes it go on so much easier. And putting the shafts back in is pretty self-explanatory. If you just look in the ends, you can see there's big splines and fine splines. So the fine splines go back onto the rack and pinion, and the big splines go on the new EPS. So we're just gonna get that slipped in there. So we got that back into the hole, and we're gonna go connect that to the top of the rack and pinion. All right, we're gonna get the EPS motor mounted to the frame. So this sits on the back side of the frame with the slot heading towards the passenger side A-pillar. And then you're gonna use the M8 by 50 bolts through the existing mounting holes. But the difference is we're gonna actually put a spacer on the back side of here behind each one before we put the nut on. All right, so just a tip that took me a second to figure out. So when you're installing the motor to the motor mount, the actual power, the old power steering unit, the motor came off over on this side. So when installing the new one, the black cylinder part of the motor actually is going that angle. So when you're putting that mounting bracket in, you have that slot here. Make sure you position that steering motor there and in that slot groove, and then mount these. And loosely mount everything, and then once you're sure everything fits, go ahead and tighten it up. So I hand tightened the 4 bolts holding the motor to the motor mount. So they've been hand tightened. Now I'm going to align everything. There's definitely some movement that you're able to adjust to get it right where you want it to go. And once you have that, I'm going to tighten the 4 motor mounts. Once that's done, I'm going to tighten these 3 frame mounts. So you can see that motor, that black part of the motor is facing up, kind of at an angle slightly to the passenger side. We got the motor mount put in, and then the motor mount to the frame. Everything is tight and secured, and plenty of clearance around it. Let's put in the ECU. So here are the existing plugs off the old EPS motor. What I did is I just covered it up in electrical tape and then zip tied them up here out of the way, because where the new unit's a standalone unit, it's not going to use these existing cords. All right, so when you first pull out the new EPS, the ECU for the EPS, you have to mount this back bracket onto the back of it. This one then mounts to that one. What I did before I put it into position is I plugged in all the wires on the opposite side. Just was a lot easier, why I could hold it out here and see it, and then mounted the ECU to the frame. All right, so we plugged in the wiring harness like I mentioned before and ran the harness over, down through the tunnel and to the battery. Then off the harness, there is a blue wire, which they tell you to cut off, you don't need. Then there's a white wire, and the white wire stubbed right here, and I had to connect another wire to it because we had to run that back up here and to the accessory. But all we got left now is to put the top shaft back in. So I'm going to get after that one, and we'll be back here in a minute. All right, whole system's wired in, everything's mounted, everything's plugged in. What I need to do now is I've got the dash ignition temporarily wired back in, and on the harness that comes with the Series 6 unit, there is a red light down here. You can see right there. So in order to make sure it is functioning properly, you're supposed to plug ignition back in, turn it on, and if it blinks once in 1 second and then turns off, you have proper operation. So let's check it out. And it looks like we're good to go. We just got the 1 blink, so awesome. All right, so as you can see, we got everything mounted in here. Everything went good. It was a good process, good install. Really not that bad, just a few tips and tricks that I shared in the video will help you get it done a little bit quicker. But I'm gonna go ahead and get this all put back together. It's gonna take a little bit, and then we're gonna go out and test it. And we'll give you our honest opinion, let you know what we think. So we're hoping for good things. And then what we're gonna do, I'll shoot another video when we swap out the steering rack. So we're going to swap that out with the Rack Boss 2.0. And I think the combination of the two, the 600 watt Series 6 new EPS motor, the Rack Boss, I think it's going to be a great combination. So we'll keep you guys posted.